Why did singer David just transfer 2 properties to his mother amid the investigation into the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, the young girl whose decomposed body was found in his car? Does this have to do with a recent apparent swatting incident at his parents' house? Is there something else going on here? Is this suspicious? Is it strategic? Let's discuss. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. There are allegations right now claiming that online apps like DraftKings, ESPN Bet, BetMGM, Bet365, Fanatics Sportsbook, Caesars Sportsbook, that they are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every small payout, free bet, boosted parlay can trigger a dopamine rush that creates dependency and a destructive habit. They can keep users hooked and trap people in a cycle that can lead to serious financial loss. While our legal sponsors are taking on the online gambling industry to seek justice and potential compensation. So if you or a loved one has struggled with addiction or financial hardship or mental health issues due to sports betting apps, then visit gamblinglawsuits.com/sidebar to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. Okay, so we have this new development in the continuing story of singer David, who has been in the news quite a lot lately since the body of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was found in a Tesla that was registered to his name. This was back on September 8th out in LA. We have been covering every aspect of this story, as currently there are no arrests, there are no identified persons of interest, there's no identified suspects, there's no released cause and manner of death. And when it comes to David, who authorities haven't officially confirmed what the exact connection or relationship he has to Celeste, even though there has been speculation and reporting that the two were romantically involved, while he hasn't been implicated in any wrongdoing or any crime, there is a lot of interesting stuff that has been going on that we have been trying to piece together to see if it has any connection to the investigation into Celeste's death. And that includes with respect to David's parents and what David reportedly did with that house that we need to talk about. Also another property. So on September 18th, we've talked about this. This is after Celeste's body was found. Someone called 911 to David's parents' house in Hempstead, Texas, in what appears to be a fake report, this alleged swatting incident.
Waller County Sheriff's Office is Amber. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, Waller County Sheriff's Office.
Hello, I need help.
Okay, what's going on? Where are you at?
My address is...
Okay, what's going on?
I heard, some, gunshots.
Okay. How close to your residence were they?
They were, right outside my house, and I think someone's dead.
Okay, what's your name?
Say it again?
What's your name? Okay, what's a good phone number for you, sir? Okay, and why do you believe that somebody's dead?
I just heard, a loud scream, and there was, gunshots.
Oh, scream. Okay. After shots. Okay, but you haven't saw or heard anything else after that?
I heard a scream.
Was it a male or a female scream, do you think?
It was a female.
Female? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get deputies headed out that way. Just confirming you're at...
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to get them sent that way, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
We actually interviewed an audio expert who concluded that this call was in fact distorted, someone masking their voice. It's on a previous episode of Sidebar. I'll play a little bit of it in a little bit. But police, they ended up showing up to this house.
It ain't on their phone.
And this is not a Texas.
Yeah, it's an out-of-state number.
Someone's messing with us.
But it would be pinged here though, because wherever they call from, it pings and sends it to dispatch.
What?
So whenever you call 911, wherever you are, it sends a ping that's how they know the address.
And this address came up to this number?
Yes, ma'am, that's where he was meeting. County to engine 42.
So is there somebody on my property?
It could be. We'll check the property for you.
Yes, please.
So we'll ride around. If you give me a layout, how's the property? Does it go further back?
No, it doesn't go any further back. It's right here, and then it goes
On
right
the fence, with the gate here, and the fence around, which is a private fence.
Well, him and I will ride around and check, and then we'll leave. And I'll put the pin back.
Okay,
All you do is pull that pen and then I'll put it all back together.
Thank you, sir.
But yeah, no, I'll take it apart because when it's something like that, when somebody says something like that, we got to get up here to save somebody's life, you know?
Yeah, okay, so that was a false alarm. You see, I don't like this kind of thing. So if I really do have an emergency, then...
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Sorry.
Well, if you do have an emergency, you know we're going to be here.
Okay.
We're going to get here.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. All right.
Y'all have a good night.
And now we got to talk about what is being reported. Okay, so according to TMZ, David has transferred deeds of 2 Texas homes to a trust in his mother's name. That this apparently happened on September 18th and September 22nd. September 18th was the day of this alleged swatting incident, and that home appears to be one of the properties that we're talking about. So why did he do this in the middle of a death investigation? Time to bring in Matthew Sarelson, trial attorney, to talk more about this. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time. Why did he do it? Why do you think he did it?
Thanks for having me. So I have 2 suspicions as to why he did this. In this case, you guys have been covering this from the start. This is getting crazier and crazier by the minute. I have 2 suspicions as to why he did it, and both of them have to do with asset protection. Old-fashioned, I want to preserve my assets in the event something happens to me. If he is charged criminally, and obviously we're speculating, but if he were to be charged criminally, there would be a monetary fine as part of any potential punishment. If he doesn't have the assets to pay the fine, then he can't pay the fine. So one thing to do is get rid of your assets and put them in someone else's name. The other side to this is related, which is there going to be a civil lawsuit? Celeste's family could file a wrongful death lawsuit against him and others. It's a little premature because there's still a lot of unanswered questions about this. But if they were to file a civil lawsuit, he could essentially try to hide assets in his mother's name or in anyone else's name for that matter. Whether he's successful is a whole different conversation.
Bunch of questions with that. By the way, this is exactly what I suspected too might be going on. Let's be clear about something though. Can, transferring these assets in the middle of a death investigation, as opposed to 2 years ago or a year ago,
right,
could a court look at this and say this was a deliberate attempt to, what you say, concealing assets, and they could breach it, they could pierce it, they could say, even though that you've transferred this into your mother's name, that was invalid. This is a way for, let's say, a plaintiff who sues him, or let's say in a criminal judgment to pay that fine. Can a court look at that and say, even though you transferred it, it's still open season on those properties?
Yeah, this is what's so puzzling about this. It is a very basic premise of law throughout the country that you can't transfer assets after the event happens that would otherwise trigger collecting on those assets. So we have rules in different states. Sometimes they're called fraudulent transfers. Sometimes they're called fraudulent conveyances. There's a lot of different names for them. But the crux of it is you cannot transfer assets to protect yourself from a creditor when the event, the triggering event, in this case, the death of Celeste, happens prior to. This happened just in the last several days versus her death, which I'm not even sure we know exactly when her death was. But clearly these transfers are after her death. So it would take little effort for a court to undo this transaction and rule that it is a collectible asset of David.
Be clear about something else. We don't know 100% why he did this, right? And I'll go to some other theories. But perhaps it does have something to do with this case regarding Celeste. If he did this in anticipation of a criminal action, or he did this in anticipation of a lawsuit, to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's guilty. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's liable. It doesn't necessarily mean that he did something here. It would just be an anticipation of what could happen, right? Because he could come out and say, I'm being falsely accused. I'm just doing what I have to do to protect myself. But that doesn't necessarily, what we say in the law, it's not consciousness of guilt, right?
Well, I'm not sure I entirely agree. I think...
Okay, that's fair.
I think you could make an argument. And depending on how it comes into evidence, you could have admissible evidence against him that it is essentially an admission of wrongdoing or an admission of liability. Now, if there's a criminal case, he can't be called to the stand and say, hey, David, why'd you do this, right? He has Fifth Amendment protections. He'd never take the stand. But that doesn't prevent his mother from taking the stand. And nothing insulates mom. So they could depose mom and say, why did David do this? Did he ever tell you why he did this? And all of his conversations, all of his text communications with mom or anyone else, those would be admissible evidence. So I have a feeling if they dig, and I suspect they're going to dig, you'll probably find some communication that is admissible and can eventually be used against him. Again, speculating. Look, if he's, I hate saying this, but if he's innocent, he has nothing to hide. That's such a sort of a weird, terrible cliche that sometimes people say. Yeah. So obviously, if he didn't do anything, if there's no judgment entered against him in a civil case, or if there's no fine levied against him as part of a criminal conviction, then yeah, the conveyance is fine and nothing will eventually happen. I think the circumstantial evidence here is that something did run afoul of David's life, and that's why he did this.
Would his mother have to testify about this transfer?
Yeah, his mother would have to testify. The lawyers who did the transaction would have to testify. The lawyers who drafted the trust documents might have to testify, depending on how these documents were created. I kind of want to see those documents, because were these properties in a trust to begin with, but he was the beneficiary of the trust and the deed was simply in the name of the trust? If that's the case, then he simply transferred the beneficiary. It's still a fraudulent conveyance. It's still going to be undone if there's eventually a judgment against him. Or did he create the trust for the purpose of this particular conveyance? And if he did, that trust document probably would have been created in the last few weeks. I want to know how that trust document came into existence. A whole lot of people are going to have to testify about that.
And real quick, why put it in a trust as opposed to just, I don't know, selling the properties to his mom?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a belief in this country. I do this a lot. There's a belief in this country that if you just put your assets in a trust, they're somehow protected. And the truth is, the reality is, almost all trusts are breakable at some level. Even the most honorific offshore trusts, you see this all the time with offshore trusts in the Caribbean or offshore European trusts, you can eventually break those trusts. It's very hard. It's very expensive. So I suspect he sort of just said, let's just put it in a trust where it won't be immediately reachable. I don't know if it's a revocable trust, if it's an irrevocable trust. If it's a revocable trust, he can simply revoke the trust and take his assets back. It would take one sentence. He could just write, I hereby revoke the trust, sign his name, the assets go back to him. If it's an irrevocable trust, he can't do that because by definition, it's irrevocable. It can be undone by a court if it was fraudulent. But there's all kinds of tax implications for a revocable trust versus an irrevocable trust. I'm not sure why he did this, except I suspect this was sort of a basic low-level attempted asset protection that I don't think is going to provide much protection in the end.
Right. I'm glad you clarified that. And by the way, let's just talk timeline real quick.
Yeah.
Any reason that this happened on the same day of the alleged swatting incident? Coincidence? Could it not even be connected to Celeste? Could it be, hey, if my family is now being targeted in some way, let's just go with that theory. My family's being targeted. Is there anything that this could do to help his family, protect him?
I thought about that. My gut is telling me it's coincidental and it's just sort of an odd timing. There's one aspect to this that I don't know about yet, which is, has the family sent a demand letter? Has the family of Celeste, not David's family, has Celeste's family lawyered up? And have they sent a demand letter to David and his people? And if the answer is yes, that demand letter may have actually triggered some of this. That may be why the timing is what it was.
And this also happened, our understanding, is the day after police got a warrant to search that rental property out in LA. Now, remember, that was a property that he had been renting reportedly $20,000 a month, gets out of it, breaks the lease, moves stuff out. Think that's any part of it?
I'm not sure about that. I've thought about that. He owns properties. He's living in a rental. There may be some tax benefits as to why he's owning property in Texas, but only renting property in Los Angeles. It's LA, obviously, is a very expensive market. So there may be a lot of reasons why he was only renting. And then the question is, look, all of his properties are going to be subject to a warrant, right? His cars, his bank accounts, his phone records. I'm sure LAPD, this is high profile. I am sure LAPD has had multiple warrants that have been executed executed, most of which we probably don't even know about, against his properties, his cars, his phone, his credit card companies. This is what happens when there's a high-profile investigation like this. Lots of warrants are going to be issued.
Well, Texas is where the car with Celeste's body inside, that's where it was registered. Significant when we think about what's going on here?
Not really. It may end up being significant if, I'll give you an example. I don't know where she was killed. We don't know. We don't even have a cause of death yet. We know very little about this. Now, is it registered in Texas because he's from Texas and that's where his family's from? That's probably the case. That's my guess. But maybe there's more to it than that. I just don't think we know if the fact that it's a Texas registered car, but it's in LA, probably should have been registered in LA because I'm sure it was there for more than 30 days, which is what triggers registration. So I'm sure it was improperly registered in Texas, but I don't think that necessarily means anything.
When you think about some of his recent moves, though, you wonder, is it all connected, right? So he hires celebrity attorney Blair Burke, moves out of the property that he was renting out in LA, which was near where the Tesla with Celeste was found abandoned. That was after authorities searched it. Canceled his tour. Promotion of his album has been halted. Do you think all of this, all these moves, all this happening is connected? Or, and again, we're just talking about the properties being transferred. Do you think it's all connected?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say it's not connected. The story here, as you know, as your audience knows, he wrote a song entitled Celeste. He had a matching tattoo with Celeste. Celeste had apparently told some family and friends. She had a boyfriend named David. There's a lot of unconfirmed reports, but there's a lot of unconfirmed reports. And you start putting a little bit of this unconfirmed report and some other unconfirmed report, and you start thinking, what are the odds here? One thing we don't know yet is, have they conducted any kind of DNA testing on her? Because if they were in a relationship, not only potentially was there wrongful death involved, but she was 14. He was over 18. That's statutory rape. There's a whole lot of things that are going on that I really want to know about. Is it all related? I don't see how it can't be. It's too overwhelming for you to say, nah, this is all just coincidental.
Well, and one thing to point out, the medical examiner's office did confirm that she wasn't pregnant, and she hadn't been pregnant in the past year. I think that's significant to call out once again. You talk about connection. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, you and I. Do you think the Texas incident, right, this alleged swatting episode, when it happened, do you think that's connected to Celeste's death in any way?
Yeah, I actually do. And I'm speculating a little bit, so I want to be clear that I'm speculating a little bit. But I'm wondering if someone in David's entourage doesn't have somewhat of a guilty conscience and knows some information and wants to, without actually dropping a dime and speaking to authorities, I'm wondering if there are people who are trying to sort of steer authorities in a certain direction and say, I can't give you the details, but look over here and go from there. I think it was intentional. I think people are trying to help out the investigation.
Let me ask you big picture. What are you going to be looking out for next? What are you expecting next in just this general story, this general case?
I'd like to know the specifics of the time of death and the cause of death. And I'd like to have more friends and people in his entourage come forward with information about the nature of their relationship. I think the nature of their relationship and the autopsy report, cause of death, is going to tell us a lot about where this investigation is headed. And let's step back for just 1 second and say, let's assume David wasn't involved in her death. Well, how else did she die? Somebody put her in that Tesla. Somebody murdered her and put her in the Tesla. Where are the other potential suspects? Who else? What is the other competing theory out there? Because I haven't heard any competing theory.
So law enforcement, a representative from law enforcement came out, commanding officer, and said, they're not entirely sure if there is a crime beyond concealing her death. In other words, there could be a situation where her death was attributed, and I'm not saying this is the case, but where her death was, let's say an accidental overdose, for example. I'm not saying that's the case here. Or she died under other circumstances, that someone panicked and took the body and put it in the Tesla. And we've talked about for weeks here why her body was in that specific car for that period of time. The car was getting noticed. The car was getting ticketed. Was there an effort for it to be discovered? It's on this public street. Is he being targeted? You look at, the swatting incident, or the alleged swatting incident too. There's a lot we just don't know. I agree with you. Once we get more results of the testing, the cause, the manner of death, that will be a very important component of this case, but we still don't even know all the circumstances surrounding it and what is going on. But we're continuing to stay on top of it and hopefully get answers sooner rather than later. Let me actually add this. Hopefully her family gets answers sooner rather than later. Matthew Sarelson, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
One more thing. We have been wondering if David is actually being targeted, if he's being harassed, right? So the idea of why was this body found in his car, public street, public place? Did someone want it to be found there? You know, the idea of the alleged swatting incident in Texas. Well, we did something in our previous episode of Sidebar. I'll give you a little sample of it. We spoke with Jennifer Owen, who is an audio expert, a video expert, and this was her conclusion about the person who called 911, okay, about whether they were masking their voice using technology. Take a listen. All right, Jennifer, let's start here. Is someone concealing their voice in this 911 call?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
And how do you know what are they doing to mask their voice?
Well, first and foremost, just listening to it as either a lay person or if you were a forensic audio analyst, it's the robotic inflection.
When you're listening to that recording, are you suggesting A, it is a real life person using a piece of technology to mask their true voice, or is this AI generated?
Well, it could be either, but just from my experience and, 30 years of doing this, it sounded like a voice changer to me.
Okay.
It sounded like a voice changer. And the reason why it sounded like a voice changer is because it all had to do with pitch. And for those of you at home, real simple, pitch is how high or how low your voice can go. And that's real easy to change. Real easy to change. You can do that with, a free app, a 99-cent app. You can do that with forensic software. If you make music, you can do that. You can do that on your WavePad. You can do that on anything. So pitch is basically just the degree of high or low of the voice. And that's the easiest way to start. But I have a sample here that I want to show you how easy it is and how by looking at it, we can say, wait a second, this is our first clue. This is the first red flag. I'm going to put this in forensic software and I'm just going to take a look at the voice formats and say, hey, how was this done?
So is this you saying this may be how the voice was changed using this piece of technology, this program? Is that what you're showing us?
It's very possible.
Okay, so show it to us.
Honorable, I need help. Honorable, I need help. Honorable, I need help. Honorable, I need help. Honorable, I need help.
All right, so there you go. We'll see what happens next in this continuing story. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.